Good morning and welcome to Grim Survival. I'm back for yet another video. Today is Wednesday, August 14th, 2019, and today I'm going to talk about climate change. That's right, climate change. Is it real? Is it really happening? Is climate changing? Let's talk about it. So anyway, I'm going to give you a little disclaimer. I'm not a scientist. I'm a truck driver. Yeah, obviously. So, if you're coming to this video thinking that you're going to get some scientific expert opinion or information from, whatever source you usually get it from, where people are smarter than me and talk about stupid things like, global warming and grand solar minimums and whatever else. And I'm not going to talk about, any kind of scientific data or anything like that because, frankly, it's just pointless and useless in my opinion. If you read any kind of scientific data on climate change, whatever, it's very conflicting. You can read 1 minute that it's being caused by cars, the next minute it's being caused by cows. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I don't even bother. What I will talk about today is what I see with my own eyes, as I usually do, because I see a lot. I mean, I go all over the place. I've been all over the country. I've been places that most people just don't go. So I see a lot. I've read a lot, and I have nothing better to do most days than to listen to videos and listen to podcasts and listen to audiobooks, or outright read them, because sometimes I actually do read. You never know. So let's just get right on into it. Climate change, is it real? Well, obviously, duh. I mean, you can see it if you open your eyes and pay attention. What got me on this topic was a headline I read probably 2-3 days ago, or actually I didn't read it. I heard it on the radio. I was listening to the radio for some odd reason, and I was subjected to some kind of news story or weather or whatever it was, and it was somewhat annoying. But they said that the Northeast is continuing to experience September-like weather. So, that piqued my curiosity, so I started checking the weather in the Northeast, areas like New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, down into Boston, places like that, New York, just basically the Northeast. I was checking their weather just to see what they were talking about, September-like temperatures. And they were getting highs in the 60s and 70s and lows in the 40s and 50s in certain areas. And, that fluctuates by about 10 degrees here and there. It just depends on where you look. That's just the general basis. So, that being said, if you check the weather from last September, or the September before that, or going back previous 5 years, you will see that that's not really September-like weather. That's January-like weather. That's, maybe not for the Northeast so much January, but that's more like November-type weather, to get it down in the 70s and lows in the 50s and 40s. Because for the last 5 years that I can remember, the temperatures in September have still been in the 80s with lows maybe in the 60s if you're lucky, and that's in the Midwest. So I'm going to basically, because this is where I live in the Midwest, I'm going to talk about that mostly. But as for the Northeast, I mean, if anyone lives up there, you can chime in please and tell me what you think about the weather that has been occurring up there, if it really is September-like, because in my opinion it is definitely not. It may have been 20 years ago, but today it's definitely not. So climate change, I will talk briefly about causes of climate change. People believe that grand solar minimum is what we're in, which basically the sun is cooling off slightly. It'll go down by like a minute amount, which will cool our planet slightly. I've heard, the global warming that is being caused by people just doing too much driving, too many cars. One of the good ones is too many cows. The cows are putting out so much, methane, whatever comes out the back of the cow, just saying. And it goes up into the atmosphere, and there's so many cows on the planet that it's actually affecting the weather. It's possible, I guess. I don't know. I'm not looking into it. I thought that was kind of entertaining, actually. But I can, from just reading it and reading what I have about it, I definitely give it a possibility. It's definitely possible. Some of the more extreme conspiracies about it is chemtrails. If you know what chemtrails are, it's the little clouds that are behind airplanes and jets that are flying over you. And people say that I've read this a lot, and I've seen it in a lot of videos, that governments, including our own, are putting aluminum in the atmosphere. Like, I guess, dusted aluminum to make our atmosphere more reflective, to reflect more of the sun's heat, to cool the planet, and they've been gradually doing this over the past 10-20 years or whatever. Is it possible? I don't know from a scientific standpoint if it's possible, if dumping aluminum into the atmosphere will actually create something more reflective for the sun to bounce. I don't know. I guess it's possible, but don't quote me. this is just things I'm repeating that I've read and heard. All right, so that's basically where we're at with climate change and the main causes, as they say. If you want to believe anything that the governments or TV says, I mean, whatever could be causing it. I believe the latest one I heard was it's all our fault, it's all my fault, your fault. We drive too much, we talk too much, I mean, we eat too much, whatever. But that's not really the point of the video. The point of the video is climate change and what I've seen. So I'm going to take you back to, when I was a kid. I've lived in Indiana most of my life. I've lived in Illinois, I've lived in Florida, I've lived in Texas, and I spent about 10 years in Texas, about a year in Florida, about 2 years I think it was in Illinois. When I was in Illinois, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. I remember the winters. I lived in northern Illinois, in the Rockford area, and I remember winters in northern Illinois I guess in November is where I want to start with it. I could tell you in October, around the Halloween times, that everybody is definitely wearing jackets, or if not heavy coats by then. I can tell you by November, there was 2 feet of snow on the ground the 2 years I lived there. Both of them. So yeah. And if you look at the weather there now in November, it's still in the 60s and 70s. So climate change has definitely occurred within the last, since I was 12, which you can figure out how old I am in another video. We might just make a video on just how old I am, just for fun. But anyway, so what I think about climate change is it most definitely has occurred. It's been changing. It's inevitable that it's going to change. The planet is constantly in a state of change, constantly. I know in India, I believe it's India, they have broken the record for the hottest place on Earth in certain places. I believe many deaths have occurred in the country because of excessive heat. So if you're talking grand solar minimum, why don't you go talk to them about it? Because I think they would disagree with you. But from a standpoint from where I'm sitting here in the Midwest, I would definitely agree with something like a grand solar minimum, because our planet has definitely cooled. At least this year in this climate, it has cooled. Because in the Midwest, I do not remember an August where it was not 80 degrees every single day, if not 90 to 100 degrees every single day in the state of Indiana, Illinois. In Texas, yes, 80, 90, 100 degrees easily throughout September. But in Indiana, yeah, you're still looking at 80 degrees in September. In some cases, we've had 80 degrees in October. And I remember last year very distinctly, we did not really have a winter. We had... That guy's crazy. Anyway, we had it was 70 degrees or so in November, and in December it was still hit the 70s several times, the 60s mostly. By January we started actually getting winter where it dropped down below freezing and we got a little bit of snow. That's pretty much all we had last winter in the Midwest where I'm at least. That being said, this year it's October. In October in Indiana, I can tell you it is usually 80 or 90 degrees every single day. And not October, it's August. Excuse me for being, my brain's not working that well. I slept for like 2 hours last night. Whenever I slept last, it was like minimal, 2 hours, and then I went to CrossFit and killed myself this morning. So yeah. Anyway, point being, it's August, and in August, we usually have 80 to 90 degree temperatures every single day in the month in the state of Indiana. So far, we've had temperatures in the 70s and 80s, occasionally 80s, mostly in the 70s. Today, it's supposed to hit 80 something, I believe. But I've started looking at weather maps throughout the United States periodically here and there, and I can tell you that from my point of view, we are cooling off. We have definitely cooled off. I can tell you from my point of view that we are back to where we used to be when I was a kid. When I was a kid, the temperatures in August were around 70 to 80 degrees. I remember it very distinctly. I've always paid attention to weather, even though I didn't have to then. I do now because of my job, but I've always paid attention to it. I've always been fascinated by weather. I always have. If I had the opportunity to chase a tornado, I probably would, even though that sounds insane. But I'd do it because it would be exciting and entertaining to me. That being said, I pay attention to weather. I can tell you, when I was a kid, temperatures in this month were 70 and 80 degrees. When it hit 80, everybody was in the pool and complaining about how hot it was. Now, people are complaining that it's too cool when it's 70 degrees, and they're looking for their 80 and 90 degree weather. And yeah, it's acclimation. You have acclimated to the climate change. That's why most people who are not aware or awake, as we like to say, know that the climate has changed because they don't pay attention enough to know. They don't realize it because their bodies have just acclimated them to the temperature changes, because it's not like a drastic thing. It's not we're at 30 degrees one day and we're at 90 degrees the next day. And I'm when I say degrees, we're all in Fahrenheit here. I am American, so we use Fahrenheit, so keep that in mind if you are in Canada or anywhere in the UK, I guess. But that being said, climate change is most definitely real. It has happened. I have seen it. It is heated. It's been a lot hotter than it should have been for the past 10 years, and now this year it's definitely a lot cooler than it has been. That being said, it's actually shifting our growing areas. We usually grow all the corn, soy, wheat, and things like that throughout the Midwest, from Ohio all the way over to Kansas. Just generalizing, okay? So in the South now, they're growing corn. They're growing corn in the South. In Texas, they're growing corn. Now, I've tried to grow corn in Texas. I lived there for 10 years. I tried to grow. It doesn't grow well in Texas. It's growing well this year, apparently. I believe the last video I watched, the guy was in Georgia or Mississippi, maybe Alabama. It was somewhere in the South. I don't remember exactly where, but he said the cornfields all in his state look beautiful. He says he's never seen corn like that, and obviously he's never been to the Midwest. But if you go down south, it's cooler than it ever has been, at least throughout my lifetime, or at least in the last 20 or 30 years. So yeah, it's definitely cooling off. Climate change is definitely happening, definitely occurring. And as far as mainstream news, I don't think they really talk about it much. They write it off as a conspiracy. Last time I bothered to pay attention to anything the news had to say, which is very rare, if at all, and it's been years, so I don't really pay attention to those people. I do have access to underground news services, YouTube news services. I can access things on the internet that not everybody can, because I just know, and I'm not going to go into that. That's definitely a different video for a different time. But the things I have read and seen just coincide with grand solar minimum, maybe. I mean, I think it is possible that our sun is cooling off. I think it could be possible. That being said, why is India breaking records for heat this year? But then again, why is the Midwest in the United States breaking records for cooler temperatures and rain this year? Climate change is happening all over the world. It's different in different areas. So I don't know if we can blame it all on a grand solar minimum. I don't think we can blame it all on global warming. Yeah, and I definitely don't think we can blame it all on humans. If you've ever watched George Carlin, which I have, it's been a while. But yeah, basically he says that the Earth will be here long after we're gone. This planet will shake us off like a bad case of fleas. Blah blah blah, if you believe that. But when the Lord's going to come back and save me, at least. I don't know about you, but he's saving me before all that happens. But, you're on your own with that one. I can't help. I'd probably help you if you really wanted me to. I could steer you in the right direction, but you got to walk through the door. That's how that works. So climate change, definitely. I think for me, the biggest believable theory I've ever heard about the planet heating up is the lack of greenery. Everywhere I go, everywhere I look, they are tearing out fields and putting up warehouses. Imagine a whole planet covered in blacktop. There's no more trees, there's no more green grass, there's no open fields. It's just blacktop and concrete. Do you think that's going to affect your temperature? I can tell you for a fact, when I go downtown in a city, no matter what city it is 10 degrees hotter than when I am, on the outskirts of that city, in the farmlands and in the trees. 10 degrees every time without fail. Easily. Sometimes more, maybe fluctuate a little less, but on average, 10 degrees. That being said, I think one of the biggest theories that is believable to me, that is that we're cutting down too many trees and we're putting up too many parking lots. I worked at a place. It was a warehouse. I was there every day. I was a driver, so I was always outside at this warehouse. They started building warehouses across the road from where I was at. Before they started building those warehouses, I used to see deer, I'd see red fox, I'd see, all kinds of things in those fields and tree lines. And then they cut it all down and tore it all up and put up warehouses. And I can tell you, after they did that, the temperature went up. It got warmer in that area. I remember it very distinctly. I remember the temperature because I always have a personal temperature gauge. I have one right here attached to my backpack. I can tell you how hot it is in this truck right now, especially being that I have the air conditioner off. I would typically, keep my air conditioner on, but I can't do it when I'm making videos because it's just too loud and you can't hear me talking. I've tried. It doesn't work. So climate change, definitely, it's real. It's happening. It could be very grim. I mean, if we look at to the extreme, if the sun is cooling off and continues to cooling off, I mean, at the most extreme, it could cool off enough to cause another ice age. But on the other hand, on the most extreme, if it heats up too much, we could all cook like chickens. I don't know. I like chicken. But anyway, that's about as grim as I'm going to be today, cooking you like a chicken. Kind of hungry now. I think it's almost lunchtime. Anyway, I'm probably not going to be making videos. If you actually made it this far to hear me say this, I'm probably not going to be making videos for the next 3 or 4 days because I'm going on vacation. I will be gone for 4 days. So, you know, you might see me make a video from a hotel room, but I wouldn't count on it. But that's it for me today. Have a good one. Remember, survival's grim. Don't die. Well, at least until after you've watched my video.